Thank you, John, very much. Well, if you wouldn't mind, it'll help, I think, for you and me to keep your Bible open. What we do on a Sunday morning is look at the verses of the reading, and I'll usually refer to specific verses as we go through, so I think it'll help you. And let me pray once again. We've prayed in our song, but I'm going to pray once again for God to help us as we look at this together. We ask again, Lord God, that you'd open our minds and our hearts and our wills, and pray that you would show us who Jesus is and why it is we must respond to him. We ask it in his name. Amen. This is a story about a meeting, a real meeting between Jesus of Nazareth and this man called Zacchaeus. And it was a life-changing meeting for Zacchaeus. I don't know what you would consider to be a life-changing meeting. Maybe bumping into Barack Obama at Stonehenge has happened to one family in recent months. Maybe meeting Simon Cowell from the X Factor, or maybe the day you met your spouse if you're married. That was a life-changing meeting. And what would happen, do you suppose, at a meeting to make it life-changing? Right at the end of this meeting, Jesus gives a summary of what has just happened, which is what's made it life-changing for Zacchaeus. Just look in the passage to verse 10, the very last verse we had read. Jesus says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." That's an enormously important verse for us today. Any decision that anyone makes about Christianity can only be made by deciding about Jesus Christ, deciding who exactly Jesus is and what exactly he came to do. And this verse has both things. Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. That means that the one with absolute, unrivaled authority, the number one in the whole universe of religions, who's top of all of them. Jesus says, "That's me." Some years ago, there was a writer who captured it well when they said this: 19 long centuries have come and gone, and today, Jesus is the centerpiece of the human race. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that have ever marched, all the navies that were ever built, all the parliaments that have ever sat, and all the kings who have ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man on earth as powerfully as that one solitary life. This meeting is going to explain why that is. Jesus is saying, this meeting that I've just had with Zacchaeus shows my whole purpose in coming to the earth. And although it happened a very long time ago now, the meeting Zacchaeus had with Jesus is actually a meeting that you and I can have with Jesus as well. And I hope we'll see that as we go through. Well, let's see what happened then. Let's look at Zacchaeus to start with. Zacchaeus is a tax collector. If you just look to verse 2, it says there, a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector. I had a friend called Trevor who worked for the Inland Revenue. He always got jibes for being a tax man. The stigma for Zacchaeus would have been even greater. As a tax collector, Zacchaeus would be working for the Romans, the occupying forces. That was like being a traitor in World War II. The deal was that the taxman gave the Romans what they required, and then they were free to raise all they wanted extra on top of that for themselves. It's like Robin Hood turned on its head, stole from the poor and everybody else to make themselves rich. And to be a tax collector in Jericho, nice place that it was, meant that he would have been really rich. So doubtless Zacchaeus had a nice place on the edge of town, kids in private schools, camel on the front drive, polished leather upholstery, alloy hooves, the works. He was public enemy number one, very wealthy, and by some very dodgy means. We think of disreputable bankers of recent years. He was despised, absolute outcast. And the question is, what on earth will famous Jesus of Nazareth say to such a person? My guess is the word Jesus uses is not one that you and I would use. If you look at verse 10 again, he says, "The Son of Man came to seek and save what was lost." Jesus is saying, I've just been dealing with a lost person. Now, we think of lost people, we think of horrible headlines like tragedies in the Himalayas or a yacht crew lost at sea. Jesus is talking actually about spiritual lostness, being lost in relation to God. And because that last line is a summary really of his whole mission to the earth, he's saying the same of everyone. He's saying that everybody is actually lost. It wasn't just that Zacchaeus had money. It's really that Zacchaeus lived for money. Later on, we're going to see it. He admits that he cheated people for money. He'll do anything to get money. And actually, that's quite a good indication, isn't it? What a person lives for. What is it that you're prepared to do anything for? Maybe you do anything for promotion. That means you're living for success. Or you do anything for the children, for your spouse, for your parents. That means you're living for family. Oh, I'd do anything to be thought well of. That means you're living for reputation, or whatever it might be. And all those things have one thing in common, which very simply is that they are not God. The loving God who made us and wants us to know him. And when we don't live for him, that means that we are lost, as Jesus describes it. And the thing is, to live like that is never a kind of innocent decision of absent-mindedness as an unfortunate thing. It's a deliberate pushing of God to the outskirts of our lives. It's to set ourselves adrift from the one who's made us with love and care. It's to say to God, go away, I want out from you. Just look at verse 9, just before the end, where Jesus describes the meeting in another way. He says, today, salvation has come to this house. Salvation has come to Zacchaeus. Salvation is a sort of typically religious-sounding word, isn't it? It simply means a rescue. It implies a prior state of emergency, like in need of the lifeguard on the beach. Jesus says we're lost, as in we're in trouble. I still remember a holiday car journey before the wonders of sat-nav, and we were going off on a trip to see some villages, some supposed villages, nearby to where we were staying. And needless to say, we didn't have very much success. But you know the sort of conversations in the car, the sort of agitated, shall I get the map out now? And depending where you're sitting in the car and whether you've got the driving wheel in front of you or whether it's in front of the person next to you, you'll have a different perspective on those situations. Some will have known that you were lost about 40 minutes ago. Others, possibly men, would have remained convinced that it should be up here just on the left and has been for the last 25 miles. We don't always know or admit we're lost when we are lost. I don't suppose Zacchaeus felt particularly lost. There's no suggestion really of anything missing in his life. Just look at him at verse 3. He wanted to see who Jesus was. That's a good thing, isn't it? I guess some people here might be here for the same reason. We want to see who Jesus is. Zacchaeus was short, and he took some initiative. He did the slightly unseemly thing of climbing a tree. That's a good safe place from which to spy on Jesus, just on his terms. But you notice Jesus never says, yes, well done, Zacchaeus, for being curious. He says he's lost. When someone comes to church, we can think, can't we, well, we've done God a favor at least by agreeing to be here. I was invited, I was too polite to refuse, and I am partly interested anyway. Jesus says that's not a plus point with God. He's saying at heart, by excluding God from our lives, by living for all sorts of other things which are not him, makes us lost. I wonder if that is a situation you recognize about yourself. You have not lived for the God who made you. And you don't have to feel lost to be lost. Life may seem fine. You may not have some major presenting issue. You can be looking on at Jesus. You can be gently pro-Jesus. And Jesus still says, if you're living for anything else in life but God, then you're lost. Let's look at the meeting itself. Zacchaeus is now up the tree. And Jesus is coming his way. Maybe Zacchaeus can't quite see Jesus yet, but he can't miss the mass of people like a swarm of bees sort of creeping along the road. And it's going to come right underneath his spot. And then he does see Jesus. And Jesus is walking along. He's coming closer and closer and closer, right to the tree where Zacchaeus is. And Zacchaeus watches. He's trying to keep as still as he can. Maybe pins and needles have set in the legs. And suddenly Jesus stops. And Jesus looks up into the tree, and he looks straight at Zacchaeus, and he says, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. Jesus says we're lost, but then Jesus seeks and saves the lost. I think it's right that somewhere between 60 and 70% of people in this country say that they believe in God. You ask those same people, what is God like? And you'll get as many different responses as people you ask. People look for God in all sorts of different places, in religion, in stars, in Wicca, in trees, in whatever else. And we live in life as if humanity is on this desperate search to find God because poor old God is lost. And Jesus says, no, it's completely the other way around. Mankind is lost, and Jesus has come to seek him. Zacchaeus is sitting there in a tree. He thinks he's found a lovely place from which he can seek Jesus. But then Jesus suddenly stops under the tree and seeks out Zacchaeus. And in Jesus' words, there's a couple of things I think it's really helpful to see. One is there's great authority in what he says. Do you see? He says, come down immediately. It's astonishing enough that he knows Jesus' name. I mean, how does he do that? But he then calls him so urgently, come down now. I must stay at your house. Great authority in those words. But also, do you see this? There is great acceptance in these words. Zacchaeus has probably never had this experience before. Somebody has stopped and they've wanted to talk to him and they've wanted to spend time in his house. Given the great rogue trader that he is, that is a remarkable thing for Jesus to say, isn't it? Zacchaeus, I know all about you, and I want to come and I want to stay in your house today. We just think what you'd expect Jesus to say. What would you expect Jesus to say to Oscar Pistorius? What would you expect him to say to a Jimmy Savile? Surely Jesus should be saying, come down, Zacchaeus, sort yourself out, and I'll think about coming round when you've amended your ways a bit. But what's amazing, what's extraordinary is that is not what Jesus says. He doesn't say, yes, I'll be back in a week when you've had a chance to change your life. No, he says, I must come today. I must come now, Zacchaeus, to your house just as you are, today. That is incredibly kind of Jesus, isn't it? To be so gracious to those who don't deserve it, to treat a criminal effectively as though, well, just as he is, just like that. And Zacchaeus knows it's incredible. In verse 6, he came down and he welcomed, literally received Jesus gladly. Now, the thing is, that's not going to go down well with everybody. You do a survey on the streets of Bournemouth and ask, should Jesus Christ readily accept Jimmy Savile? Readily accept Oscar Pistorius? There'll be plenty of moral objection to that. Just as there was in that day. Verse 7, all the people see it, and they begin to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. How can Jesus do that? How can that be fair? How is that sort of just? How is that a good way to respond to someone like that? He cannot surely just sweep all the corruption under the carpet. And that is right. He can't do that. And he doesn't do that. What Jesus does is he sees to it that it is publicly punished, what Zacchaeus has done. Not long after this meeting with Zacchaeus, Jesus will carry on his journey to Jerusalem. and he will be crucified. And the extraordinary thing is that as he dies on the cross, he takes upon himself the punishment for terrible crimes like Zacchaeus' life. And he takes on himself the punishment for endlessly living life without God at all. The punishment for all the lostness of people like Zacchaeus. That's how Zacchaeus can be accepted. God's fair punishment for what's been done, it's going to be taken by Jesus. That's how Jesus can come to anyone as they are. That's how anyone, literally anyone, we've heard it this morning already, everyone who calls, whoever believes, that's how they can be accepted. If you or I were to rewrite verse 10, the last verse, we might have written something like, the Son of Man came to seek and save those who somehow managed to find themselves. But Jesus doesn't say that. He came to seek and save the lost. And that's still his purpose today. That's his purpose for people like you and me this morning. Whether your life is a terrible life by public standards, whether you've persisted in just living for something else, for family, for wealth, for reputation, whatever it is, Jesus seeks you out. You may have come this morning hoping to remain safely in the tree, so to speak. To look on Jesus without, please, anyone bothering you over coffee. But Jesus has stopped. And he calls you down. He's seeking you out. And he's seeking you out just as you are. Some may remember back in the 1990s, the high-profile politician Jonathan Aitken, one-time Minister of State for Defense, later Chief Secretary to the Treasury. And you'll remember perhaps that his political career came to an end when he told a lie under oath in a libel action. He became an outcast in the public eye. He pleaded guilty to charges of perjury and spent 7 months in Belmarsh prison. But it was in prison, as he read of accounts like this in the life of Jesus, that he received Jesus and welcomed him gladly. And his life was completely turned around. He now spends time campaigning for prison reform, for the good care of ex-offenders and things like that. He speaks of himself following Jesus Christ. And being welcomed by Zacchaeus is not the end of the matter for Jesus. The final thing we're going to see this morning is how Jesus then transforms those who are lost. There's a very dramatic result of this life-changing meeting. And although Jesus accepts us as we are, he does not leave us as we are. Jesus is in the business of restoring people and redecorating their lives, if you like. When people receive him, he transforms their lives, as in verse 8. Just look down once again. Here is Zacchaeus, having met with Jesus. He stands up and he says to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." For a start, there's a great change of lordship in his life. That's the word he uses at the beginning of that. Look, Lord, just a word that means boss or master, the one in charge. And where Zacchaeus used to live for money, he'll do anything to get money. Now he's going to do anything for Jesus. Jesus is his new, real Lord. And a change of lordship leads to this dramatic change of life. Many people, I think, have the idea being a Christian is about doing certain respectable things, like giving your money away to charity. And they read this and they see Zacchaeus giving away money to charity, as it were, and they think, oh, he's being very generous, that's made him a Christian. But giving away his money is not the cause of his salvation. It is the result of what has happened. And when Jesus says that salvation has come, he's not saying, I'm responding to Zacchaeus. No, he's saying, look, Zacchaeus has definitely responded to me. Now, they're a bit out of date now, but you might remember the adverts for washing powder on television. The little boy's football kit caked in mud, and it then comes out sparkling white. And the point of those adverts is to make us marvel at what? At the white shirt? No. To marvel at Ariel, Daz, whatever the washing powder is, the cause of the change. And it's the same here. It's nothing less than a miracle for money-grabbing Zacchaeus to be turned about and to pay back 4 times what he's cheated people out of. That was way more than the law required. The point is, it's meeting Jesus that has caused it to happen. And once a person today welcomes Jesus, we give everything over to him. Every room of the house. The room of money, like for Zacchaeus. The room of our work. The room of our relationships. The room of sex. The room of reputation, ambition, future, everything. Someone has said, if Jesus is Lord at all, then Jesus is Lord of all. And just as we give over everything to him, it does mean, too, we will give up some things. Not everything. You may have thought that Christianity is about stopping doing everything I like doing. No, we give up the things that are not good for life in this world. Zacchaeus gives up cheating people. And meeting Jesus brings new standards and new desires in a person. Now, I'm very near to finishing, but just before I finish, let me say a word to various people who will be here. You may be here, you're a Christian, and you've been here perhaps for many years. I just want to say to you, do remember, it was never you that found Jesus. In one sense, yes, you may have inquired and asked some questions, but really, he found you. Just as you were is how he saved you. And you might ask yourself a question, does my life reflect that I've been found by Jesus? Would others know that I am one of his followers by the things that I do, by the way that I speak, by the attitudes that I have? It might be you're sitting here and you've not been in a church building before. Well done for braving it. I hope it perhaps hasn't been as bad as you feared. And I hope you've been welcomed at some point of the morning. What you need to work out first, if I can say this, is not your enjoyment of church, but your view of Jesus Christ. If you fundamentally, for example, disagree with what he says about being lost, you must ask yourself, who do I think Jesus is? And Christianity Explored, I was talking about earlier, would be a very good way to do that, to ask that question. You may like to pick up a booklet called Crossover to Life, which we've got around the place at the information point and as you go. That explains too who Jesus is and what response to him will look like. But there may be others here too who agree with Jesus, and you hear his diagnosis and you think, well, yes, I have lived for lots of other things that are not God. I've never thought of it before, but I guess lost is what I really am. I see that. And the thought of Jesus stopping for you, of him knowing everything about you and still wanting to come into your life, that is an amazing thing. And you understand too that welcoming him is going to mean transformation in every part on his terms. There's no better day, can I suggest, than today to receive Jesus, to welcome him gladly. And I wonder if you do that today. When the service is finished, I'm going to be down here at the front, and I'd love to talk through this booklet with you and to explain a bit more about how you would welcome Jesus gladly and receive him into your life. And I'd be very glad to meet you and to talk about that more.